I heard the laughter before I reached the bottom of the staircase. Not the bright, generous laughter of delight, the other kind. The kind that travels in whispers and cuts from behind fans, designed to be heard by everyone except the person it concerned. Except I heard it. I always heard it. 3 seasons of being the poor relation had given me ears like a foxhound for that particular frequency of cruelty. I stopped on the 4th step from the bottom and pressed my gloved hand flat against the banister. The silk beneath my fingers was older than every other gown in that ballroom. 15 years older. The colour had been ivory once. It had aged to the soft gold of candlelight on parchment. The lace at the bodice was Flemish, hand-worked, exquisite, and torn in 2 places I had repaired so carefully that you would need to stand inches away to find the stitches. My mother had worn this dress to her last ball before the consumption took her. She had been 26, beautiful, alive. I was 20, and I was wearing her ghost. And Lady Phoebe Cartwell was standing 12 feet away, saying, loud enough to carry, "Good Lord, is that mending on her sleeve?" I descended the final steps. I had practice at this. The lifted chin, the measured pace, the expression that said nothing because any expression at all would be feasted upon. I had been performing this particular piece of theatre since my father's debts became common knowledge, and my aunt took me in as an act of charity she never let me forget. The Chiswick Ball was the final event of the London season, and it was magnificent. 300 candles in the chandeliers, hothouse flowers in crystal vases. Every woman in the room was draped in new silk, pale pinks, celestial blues, silver tissue that caught the light like water. They looked like a garden in full bloom. I looked like something pressed between the pages of an old book. I knew it. I had known it when I fastened the buttons that morning with hands that trembled, not from shame, but from the effort of touching something my mother had touched, and feeling the distance between her life and mine. "Miss Lennox?" My aunt materialised at my elbow, her smile fixed and furious. Lady Cavendish, Aunt Marguerite, had married well and spent lavishly and considered my existence a personal affront to her social standing. "I thought we discussed this. I laid out the white muslin." "The white muslin is yours, Aunt. This dress is mine." "That dress is a disgrace. You look as though you have wandered in from a second-hand shop." "I look like my mother." Her mouth thinned. She could not argue with a dead woman in public, and she knew it. "Stay near the wall," she said, "and for heaven's sake do not draw attention." I did not intend to draw attention. I intended to stand at the edge of the room and survive the evening the way I survived every evening. By being invisible. By watching. By holding the memory of my mother's dress against my body, like armour made of love instead of steel. But then, Lady Phoebe raised her voice another degree, and the circle of women around her tittered, and I heard the word threadbare, and something inside me went very still and very cold. And then a man's voice cut across the noise like a blade through silk. "That lacework, is it Flemish?" I turned. Everyone turned. Because the voice belonged to the Duke of Halford, and the Duke of Halford did not speak to people at balls. He attended, when he attended at all, as a concession to obligation, stood at the periphery with an expression that discouraged approach, and departed before the supper dance. He was 31, unmarried, reportedly impossible, and so wealthy that society forgave him every rudeness, because the alternative was losing the most eligible title in England from their guest lists. He was standing 3 feet from me. He was looking at my sleeve. Yes, I said. "Yes, it is Flemish." "Brussels or Bruges?" "Bruges. My mother purchased the lace there herself, before I was born." He was tall, dark hair, severe features, The kind of face that looked as though it had been designed to intimidate, and then softened at the last moment by eyes that were unexpectedly warm. Brown, not the cold grey I had imagined from across crowded rooms. He was studying the lacework at my cuff, with the focused attention of a man examining a manuscript, not a gown. "The pattern is point de fait," he said. "They stopped making it in 1802. There are perhaps a dozen examples left in England." He looked up from my sleeve to my face, and something shifted in his expression. A flicker of recognition, not of me, but of something he understood. "Your mother had extraordinary taste." The room had gone quiet. Not silent, 300 people cannot fall silent, but the particular pocket of air around us had stilled, and I could feel the weight of every gaze recalibrating. A moment ago, I had been the girl in the mended dress. Now the Duke of Halford was standing beside me, speaking to me, and the social mathematics of the evening were being frantically rewritten. "She did," I said. My voice was steady. I was astonished by this. "Is this her gown?" "Yes." "You wear it well." He said it simply. No flattery, no performance, a statement of fact delivered in the same tone he had used to identify the lacework. And then he did something that sent a visible ripple through the ballroom. He stayed. Lady Phoebe appeared at his periphery within minutes, resplendent in rose silk, her smile calibrated to perfection. "Your Grace, how wonderful to see you this evening. Mamma was just saying she hoped you might—" "Miss Cartwell." He did not turn his head. "I am in conversation." "Of course, but I only thought—" "I am in conversation." The repetition was polite, quiet, and absolutely final. Lady Phoebe's smile fractured. She retreated. The ripple became a wave. I should have been grateful. I should have been relieved. Instead, I was suspicious, because I had learned, through 3 seasons of being pitied, patronised, and paraded as my aunt's charity project, that powerful men did not stand beside poor relations without reason. "Why are you here?" I asked. It was rude. It was direct. It was the kind of question a woman in my position should never ask a duke. He looked at me with an expression I could not read. "Because every woman in this room is dressed to be admired. You are dressed to remember someone. I find that considerably more interesting." I did not see him again for 3 days. This was by design, mine, not his. My aunt, who had spent the carriage ride home oscillating between fury that I had drawn attention and elation that the attention came from a duke, had already begun scheming. She wanted calls, introductions, carefully engineered meetings. She wanted to parade me through the parks and drawing rooms of Mayfair like a horse being shown before auction. I refused. All of it. "You ungrateful girl," Aunt Marguerite hissed over breakfast. "Do you understand what his attention could mean? For you, for this family?" His attention was about a piece of lace, Aunt, not a proposal. Men do not cross ballrooms for lace. She was not wrong. I knew she was not wrong, and the knowing sat inside my chest like a coal I could not put down. Too warm to hold, too precious to drop. On the 4th day, a letter arrived. Not for me, that would have been improper. It was addressed to my aunt and written in a hand so precise it looked almost architectural. The Duke of Halford requested the pleasure of calling upon Lady Cavendish and her household at her earliest convenience. It was signed with a single initial, H. My aunt nearly fainted with delight. I nearly fainted with dread. He arrived at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, and the absurdity of the scene almost undid me. Aunt Marguerite had arranged the drawing room as though staging a play. The best china, fresh flowers, my 2 cousins positioned on the settee like ornamental bookends in matching blue. I had been permitted to sit in the corner with my embroidery, which my aunt clearly intended as a prop to make me look demure and domestic. The Duke walked in, surveyed the room in a single glance, and crossed directly to my corner. "Miss Lennox, I hoped you would be here." Behind me, I heard my cousin Dorothea inhale sharply. My aunt's teacup rattled against its saucer. "Your Grace?" I set down my embroidery. I was stitching a rose, badly. I had never been skilled with a needle, which made my repair of my mother's dress either an act of devotion or an act of stubbornness. Likely both. "How kind of you to call." "I came to ask you something." He sat in the chair beside mine, without waiting to be directed, which placed his back to the rest of the room and his full attention on me. It was a devastatingly effective piece of spatial manoeuvring. My aunt could observe, but could not participate without physically relocating. "I have been thinking about the Bruges lace," he said. "Point de fait. The pattern represents a particular technique that requires..." He paused. "Recalibrated. Forgive me. I suspect you did not expect a lecture on textile history." I did not, but I find I do not mind it. Something shifted at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. The Duke of Halford did not appear to traffic in smiles, but the ghost of one. The suggestion that smiling was something he had once known how to do, and might, under the right circumstances, remember. "The technique was developed by a single workshop in Bruges," he said. "My mother collected their work. She had a particular fondness for it, spent years acquiring examples. After she died, my father sold the entire collection to settle a wager." The sentence landed between us like a stone dropped into still water. He said it plainly, without inflection, but I heard everything beneath the surface. The loss, the fury, the helpless rage of watching something beloved be destroyed by someone who should have protected it. "I am sorry," I said. "It was 16 years ago. Grief does not observe calendars." He looked at me, and for one unguarded second, I saw something behind his eyes that I recognized. The look of a person who has been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and has just realized that someone else can see the weight. Then the second passed. His expression closed like a door, and he was the Duke of Halford again. Remote, precise, armoured in reserve. "I wish to ask," he said, "whether you would permit me to see the lace more closely. The Bruges work. I believe your mother's gown may contain one of the last surviving examples of the original point de fait technique, and I would very much like to examine it." Behind us, my aunt made a small, strangled sound that suggested she believed examining her lace was either a euphemism or a catastrophe. "You want to see my mother's dress," I said. "I want to see the craftsmanship, the artistry, the thing your mother chose to carry with her." He paused. "And yes, I want to see your mother's dress." I should have said no. A duke examining a poor relation's worn-out gown was not courtship. It was curiosity, and curiosity was a fire that burned bright and died fast. But he had spoken about his mother's collection with the same raw, undecorated grief I felt every time I fastened the buttons on ivory silk, and I thought, he understands what it means to hold something that belonged to someone you have lost. "Thursday next," I said. "I will have it ready." He came on Thursday, and the Thursday after, and the one following that. What began as an examination of lacework became something I had no framework for. A conversation that continued across weeks, picking up mid-sentence each time he arrived, as though the days between visits were merely pauses for breath. He knew more about textiles than anyone I had ever met. The history of silk production in Lyon, the politics of cotton in Lancashire, the way a single thread could be traced across continents and centuries. He spoke about craft the way other men spoke about horses or hunting, with genuine passion and deep, specific knowledge. But it was not only lace we discussed. Between the technical observations and the historical tangents, other things surfaced. Carefully, the way fish rise in a stream, visible for a moment and then gone. He mentioned his mother only twice more. Once to describe her hands. She had ink stains on her fingers constantly. She was forever writing letters. And once to say, very quietly, "She died when I was 14. My father told me to stop grieving within the month. He said it was unseemly for a future duke to weep." I wanted to reach across the space between our chairs and take his hand. I did not. But the wanting was so sharp it felt physical. A tightness in my chest, a heat in my palms. On the fourth Thursday, he arrived early. Aunt Marguerite was out making calls, my cousins were upstairs, and only the housekeeper was present to serve as chaperone, a grey-haired woman named Mrs. Firth, who had a tendency to doze in warm rooms. "Miss Lennox?" He stood in the doorway of the drawing room and did not come in. "I should return when your aunt is home." "You should." He looked at me. I looked at him. Mrs. Firth was already settling into her chair by the fire, eyelids heavy. He came in, sat in his usual chair, but the air had changed, charged, the way it felt before a storm, when you could taste electricity on your tongue. Without my aunt's presence, without the cousin's watchful eyes, the room felt half the size. "I have been meaning to ask you something," he said. "Not about lace." "Then what? Why do you continue to wear the dress? You must know what it costs you. The whispers, the ridicule, your aunt's displeasure. You could wear muslin, like every other woman of the season, and avoid all of it." "I could." "Then why don't you?" I considered lying, considered offering some palatable answer about sentiment or frugality. That he had told me about his mother's lace collection being sold to settle a wager, and a man who offered that kind of truth deserved truth in return. "Because my mother is dead," I said. "My father is dead. Our house was sold. Our furniture was auctioned. Our books, our paintings, her garden, everything she touched was scattered or destroyed. That dress is the last thing left of her in the world. When I wear it, I can feel the shape her body made in the fabric. I can feel where her shoulders pressed against the seams. It is the closest I can come to being held by her again." My voice did not break. I was proud of that. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he reached inside his coat and withdrew something small. A square of fabric, no larger than a handkerchief, edged in lace so fine it looked like frost on glass. "This is the only piece I have of my mother's collection," he said. "I found it in a drawer after my father died. He must have missed it when he sold the rest. I have carried it for 12 years. He held it out, not offering, showing. The way you show someone a wound that has never been properly tended. I leaned forward. The lace was point de fait, the same pattern as my mother's dress, the same workshop, the same impossible, vanished craft. "We are a pair," I said, and my voice came out softer than I intended. "Yes," he said, "I believe we are." Mrs. Firth snored gently by the fire. The clock on the mantel ticked, and the Duke of Halford looked at me as though I was something rare and irreplaceable, not a poor relation in a mended dress, but a person who understood the language of loss, which was the only language he had ever been fluent in. He did not touch me. He did not need to. The distance between us was 3 feet wide and thin as silk, and I could feel the heat of his attention like sunlight through glass. I should have known it could not last. Good things in my life had a pattern. They arrived gently and were taken violently. Lady Phoebe Cartwell's mother, the Countess of Briar, called upon my aunt on a Tuesday morning. I was not invited to the drawing room, but the walls in my aunt's townhouse were thin, and I heard every word from the hallway above. You must understand my concern, Lady Cavendish. The Duke of Halford's attentions to your niece have become the subject of considerable discussion. I assure you, Lady Briar, the Duke's visits are entirely proper. Proper or not, they are inconvenient. My Phoebe has been intended for Halford since her presentation. The families have an understanding. An understanding? An arrangement. His late father and Lord Briar discussed it years ago. Nothing signed, but well understood. And I will not have it undermined by a girl with no fortune and a mother's old dress. A silence. Then my aunt's voice, careful and calculating. What would you have me do? Remove her. Send her to the country. A relative in Devonshire, perhaps, or a school abroad. It matters not, so long as she is away from London before the little season. And if I do this? Then you have my gratitude and my support, which, as you know, carries considerable weight in the circles that matter. My aunt did not hesitate, not even for a breath. I will make the arrangements. I stood in the hallway with my hands pressed against the wallpaper and felt the floor tilt beneath me. Not surprise. I had never been foolish enough to think my aunt loved me. But the speed of it, the ease, the casual efficiency with which two women decided to dispose of me, like clearing a plate after supper. That evening, Aunt Marguerite informed me that I would be travelling to Devonshire at the end of the week to stay with a distant cousin I had never met. She presented it as a kindness. The sea air will do you good. And when I asked how long I would be gone, she smiled and said, as long as necessary. I had 3 days. I wrote to the Duke. This was reckless, possibly ruinous, an unmarried woman writing directly to an unmarried man. But I had no mutual acquaintance who could carry a message discreetly, no one I trusted, and 3 days before I was shipped to Devonshire like a piece of unwanted furniture. The letter was short. Your Grace, I am being sent away. I thought you should know. I regret that we will not finish our conversation about Bruges lace. C. Lennox. I sent it with the scullery maid, who was young and frightened and owed me a favour because I had taken the blame for a broken tureen the previous month. The reply came the same evening, tucked beneath my bedroom door. Miss Lennox. Where? When? Do not go quietly. H. And beneath the initial, in smaller writing, as though he had hesitated before adding it. I have not finished examining the lace. I am not certain I ever will be. On the morning of my departure, I descended the stairs carrying a single trunk and wearing my mother's dress. Aunt Marguerite was waiting in the entrance hall, tight-lipped, already in her calling clothes. Must you wear that? She said. Yes. The carriage is waiting. You will travel with Mrs. Firth as far as Salisbury, and from there... The front door opened. Not a knock, not an announcement. The door simply opened, and the Duke of Halford walked into my aunt's entrance hall as though he owned it. He was dressed immaculately, impeccable coat, perfect cravat, the full weight of his title visible in every line of his bearing. But his eyes were not immaculate at all. They were raw and urgent and fixed on me with an intensity that stopped the air in my lungs. Lady Cavendish, he said, not looking at my aunt. I understand you are sending your niece away. My aunt went white. Your Grace, how did you... The particulars do not concern me. What concerns me is this. Miss Lennox is not going to Devonshire. With respect, Your Grace, she is my ward, and She is 20 years old, Lady Cavendish. She is not your ward. She is your niece, residing in your household at your invitation. An invitation you may revoke, certainly, but which does not grant you the authority to exile her at the behest of the Countess of Briar." My aunt's mouth fell open. Mine nearly did the same. He knew. He knew about Lady Briar. He knew about Phoebe. He knew the entire architecture of the conspiracy, and he had walked through the front door on the morning of my departure to dismantle it in person. "There is no arrangement between myself and the Cartwell family," he said. "There has never been an arrangement. My late father may have discussed it in his cups, but I have never agreed to it, and I never will. Lady Briar's presumption is her own concern. I will not have it used as a weapon against a woman whose only offence is wearing her mother's dress with more dignity than this entire city deserves." The entrance hall was very quiet. My aunt, Mrs. Firth, 2 footmen pretending to be deaf, and me, standing on the bottom step in ivory silk, watching a man I had thought incapable of public feeling dismantle the cage around me with words as precise and devastating as a surgeon's blade. He turned to me. For the first time since entering, his expression softened. Not dramatically, but enough. The Duke of Halford did not deal in dramatic gestures. He dealt in small, exact shifts that carried more weight than any grand performance. "Miss Lennox, you do not have to go anywhere you do not wish to go. And if I wish to stay in London, then I will ensure you have somewhere to stay. People will talk. People are already talking. They have been talking since I crossed a ballroom to ask about your lace. I find I do not care. I have not cared for some weeks. I suspect you know this." I did know. I had known since the day he showed me his mother's handkerchief. That small square of fabric carried for 12 years, offered not as a gift, but as an act of recognition. "I see what you carry. I carry something too." "Your Grace, Benedict," he said, his Christian name, offered like a key to a room I had not known existed. "If you are willing." The footman was staring. My aunt looked as though she might shatter. Mrs. Firth had begun to weep, softly and with great enthusiasm. "Benedict," I said. The name felt extraordinary in my mouth, heavy and warm and real, like holding something that had been handed to me freely instead of taken. He crossed the entrance hall, stopped in front of me, close enough that I could see the fine thread of his cravat, the way his jaw tightened as though he were holding himself in place by force of will. "I did not come here for lace," he said very quietly. "I did not come to the Chiswick ball for lace. I have not been coming to this house on Thursdays for lace. I came because you were standing in a room full of people trying to be seen, and you were the only one who was trying to be true. And I have spent 31 years surrounded by performance, and I am so tired of it I could burn this city to the ground. And then you were there, in a dress that meant something, and I—" He stopped, swallowed. The Duke of Halford, who spoke about textile history with effortless precision, who could silence a ballroom with 3 words, could not finish his sentence. "And you what?" I whispered. "And I recognised you," he said. "Not your face, not your name. Something else. Something I have not felt since I was 14 years old, and still had a mother who left ink stains on her letters. You felt like home, and I was not, I am not, prepared to let that go." I kissed him, in the entrance hall, in front of my aunt and Mrs. Firth and 2 footmen and God himself. I put my hands on the lapels of his immaculate coat, and I kissed him. And he made a sound, low and startled and raw, and his hands came up to cradle my face, as though I were something made of Bruges lace, something irreplaceable, something he had been searching for in drawers and collections and empty rooms for 12 years. My aunt said, "Good Lord." Mrs. Firth wept louder. Neither of us cared. We were married 6 weeks later at St. George's, Hanover Square. Half the ton attended, not out of approval, but out of the desperate, slavering curiosity that London society brings to any event it has spent weeks condemning. I wore my mother's dress. Not the ivory gown, that was too fragile now, too precious. But the lace. A length of point de fée from the bodice, carefully removed by a seamstress whose hands shook when she touched it. Sewn into the veil that fell across my shoulders as I walked toward a man who was not smiling, because the Duke of Halford still did not smile easily, but whose eyes, when I reached him, were bright in a way I had only seen once before, in a drawing room on a Thursday afternoon, when he showed me a piece of fabric he had carried for half his life. Lady Briar did not attend. Lady Phoebe married a viscount the following spring, and was, by all accounts, reasonably content. My aunt attended. She sat in the third pew and looked as though she had swallowed something complicated. I sent her flowers the following week, not as forgiveness, as dismissal. A beautiful, expensive, utterly impersonal arrangement that said, "I have risen above you, and I do not need you, and I will never stand in your hallway and be told to stay near the wall again." Benedict understood the flowers without being told. He was good at that, reading the language beneath the gesture, the meaning inside the object. It was why he had crossed that ballroom, not because the lace was rare, but because he understood that a woman who wears something mended when she could wear something new is a woman who values love over appearance. We live at Thornfield now, his estate in Wiltshire, where the gardens are overgrown and the library smells of old paper and the light comes through the windows in long golden sheets that remind me of the colour my mother's dress has become. On the mantelpiece in our bedroom, in a frame Benedict had made by a craftsman in Bath, are 2 pieces of lace, side by side. His mother's handkerchief, a square cut from my mother's bodice. Point de fée, both of them, made in the same workshop, by the same hands, decades apart. 2 remnants of 2 women we loved, pressed together behind glass. He found me looking at it last week, early in the morning, before the house was awake. I was in my nightgown, with my hair loose and my hand on the frame, and he came up behind me and put his arms around me and rested his chin on the top of my head. "Do you think they would have liked each other?" I asked. "Our mothers?" "I think they would have been impossible together. Ink stains and ivory silk. They would have been magnificent." I leaned back against his chest, felt his heartbeat against my spine. Outside, the garden was coming alive in the early light. Roses, lavender, the jasmine he had planted because I mentioned once that my mother grew it. "Benedict?" "Thank you for crossing the ballroom." He tightened his arms around me. "Thank you for wearing the dress."